Good morning. You're watching Much Ado About Something today, and I'm Donna. Well, I'm starting out here in the garden today. I have a busy day, and today I wanted to share with you 5 general tasks to maintain the garden. It's 5 things that I do on a regular basis that help me keep this garden maintained. You know, it's quite a bit of plants and things out here that I have to try to keep as maintained to grow as well as I possibly can. And I enjoy gardening. But today I've got a really busy day. I've got the grandkids coming and my schedule is really full. But I wanted to jump out here and do these 5 things that I do on a regular basis, these 5 general things, general tasks that help me maintain this garden on a regular basis. And I wanted to bring you along with me because I thought it might be something that you could incorporate into your gardening plan if it is something that you're interested in. And maybe you have some general tasks that you'd like to share with me that you do to maintain your garden. Well, one of the first tasks that I do, the very first task on my list, is weeding. Now this area right here, that's a lot of weeds. I know that I can't get that done in 10 minutes, so I'm not going to tackle that. That's a whole day's weeding. So I'm going to move around and just find simple little weeds that I can pull out in 10 minutes time. Like here in this front bed, here's some general weeds around the edge that I can tackle and probably get within 10 minutes time. Well, here they are. Here's these little weeds that's trying to grow up in my garden. Now the few tools that I have to do this quick weeding is this claw tool. They're sold in most garden centers. I spray painted this one with a fluorescent paint so that when I lay it down I can see it easier. And this weeding tool, since I'm up here against this this driveway, I'm going to probably need this weeding tool to help me pry some of these close weeds up. And then I've got this bucket, and it's just an old bucket that a plant came in, and that's where I'm going to put my weeds. So I'm just going to get out here and tackle these weeds for about 10 minutes because as much as I would like to stay out here all day, I'm not going to be able to do that today. So I'll just pry that weed up, put it in the bucket, and I'll either put these weeds in the compost or give them to the chickens. Now weeding can be a really messy job. You can wear gloves if you want to. I usually don't wear gloves because I love to feel the dirt for some reason. Now we've got a common weed here called crabgrass, or Bermuda grass, some people call it. And that is probably one of my worst weeds, although I have found other weeds that are creeping in that I have got to get rid of. So coming up in the gardening plan shortly, I'll have some major weed tackling to do, and that might be a whole video in itself. But today I'm just going to work 10 minutes on pulling up these weeds. And you'd be surprised at what 10 minutes a day can do. You know, if you just devote 10 minutes a day to getting rid of some weeds in your garden, it makes such a difference to keep everything from taking over, the weeds from taking over. And I like to go ahead and pull the weeds because you get the root and all, and the likelihood of them coming back is reduced. I'm trying to keep a clean edge on this driveway here. And there's very few plants that I would want to grow right here this close to this driveway. I did let one of the Queen Anne's lace stay over there because, you know, I love that weed and that beautiful plant, and it can certainly stay. But all this other grass and all this other stuff, I'm weeding it. Here's the Bermuda grass, and of course there's roots up under there. I'm not going to get all the roots, but I'm going to pull on it whenever I can. Whenever I see it growing where it shouldn't, I'm going to pull it up. And eventually, I'll get it up. Maybe not. That might be a lifetime battle in the garden for me. There was a lot of crabgrass here when we moved here. And of course, over here in the perennial herb garden, I see some weeds coming up that don't need to be here. Here's a morning glory, a little redbud tree. I put myself on a timer for this weeding job, this weeding task, because if I didn't, I would be out here doing this all day. I could very easily spend a day weeding. Because if you're a gardener, weeds are always something you're going to have. And here's a much respected weed. That's the dandelion, so I'm going to leave it because it's something I use in my apothecary. Got to get up as many of these redbud weeds as I can because they'll grow up to be way too big. Put those weeds in the compost bin. Now I have in no way, shape, or form eradicated all the weeds in this garden that needs to be eradicated today. But I have made a dent in it, and I have been able to work for 10 minutes out here to get the weeds that I need to get up. And 10 minutes a day can make a difference in your gardening. Now this tree here, the next task on my list is to prune some things that need to be cut back. And you can see this tree, it's had an exorbitant amount of growth there in the top. It's took a growth spurt. And so it's real bushy here in the top. And so I'm going to have to cut this back to keep it shaped up and keep it in line with the rest of this tree. And so this will just take a few minutes. It's not something that'll take very long. And I can see where the new growth has come out. And that's what I'm going to be trimming along. That just shapes that tree up a little bit better and keeps it in line with the rest of the tree. And then I've got a little bit of trimming to do right here on the sidewalk. I've got stuff that's just probably grown halfway across the sidewalk, and I don't like for that to happen. So I'll have to take and trim that back. Now this is spearmint. It's an herb and it's very useful, so I'll be keeping some of this I cut down and drying it for teas. There's some spearmint mixed in these cuttings, so I'll pick out what it is that I'll be using in the apothecary to be dried. And then the rest of this, of course, I'll rake it up and put it in the compost bin. So a lot of spearmint, and then there's some chocolate mint here that I'll also keep. So that gets some of that overgrowth off of the sidewalk. And what do we discover when we do that? That there's a few more weeds that have to be taken care of. You don't want weeds to grow up in your sidewalk because that looks like it's an unmaintained area. It looks neglected. So I have to do a little emergency weeding here and make sure I get these weeds off of this sidewalk. Now these are the cuttings that I've chosen to keep. This is the harvested spearmint that I'll bundle up and dry later. There's a little piece of passion flower there, and then some chocolate mint. So that's some bounty. That's a harvest that I got from cutting back my garden this morning. Now the next step I have here is top dressing. I put down some of these basil plants, these purple basil plants, and I'm going to have to put some better soil around them. Sometimes the soil erodes away. In this case, there just wasn't enough to put back in the hole when I dug a hole to plant these. But there's different reasons that you might need to top dress a plant. Like when I moved this hellebore, I'm just going to put a little bit of more soil it looks like it's washed away where I've watered it, where it's settled over the last week since I've moved it. So I'm just going to put a little bit more of this dirt and compost mix that I have here around it so that its roots are not exposed. This is a good example of a daylily whose roots are exposed, whose rhizomes are not covered in dirt. So I'm going to go ahead and top dress this daylily with some compost and soil mixture. I want to cover up its roots. So the third thing on that list was top dressing, and I've walked around the garden. This is just a few minutes for you, but it's more than an hour for me already out here, pulling weeds, trimming back, and top dressing the soil in naked areas, you know, that where soil has eroded, or maybe there wasn't enough to begin with there, different reasons. But I spent quite a bit of time doing that. And the next thing on our list is feed and fertilize, which I don't do a lot of that at this time of the year. Even though everything is growing, I do need to feed these hanging baskets. So, I mean, these hanging baskets are up here in a basket, and they're not able to get nutrients except what we give them. Of course, I have some Miracle Grow. I don't know how many people feel about that, but that's what I use for a lot of the hanging baskets because it's affordable for me. I do use some fish emulsion and different things like that, but in general, I'll just go ahead and use the Miracle Grow in the hanging baskets. And I just fill them up until they run over. And I also put them in the container gardens. Got a weed in the container garden. I think feeding and fertilizing is essential in a container garden. It's not a place you can add a lot of compost, and the plants definitely need it. I try to put it in the center to keep it from all running out of the edges. That pretty red coneflower. Some flowers blooming here. And when I showed you the birthday video for my sister and dedicated it to her, there was only one passion flower opening up, but today there's plenty there. And the bees are loving that. A lot of pretty blooms this morning. And the last thing, the last task on my list, number 5, is to water. I, of course, want to get out here and water as early as I can because it's going to be a really hot day, and as much as these plants can absorb, it'll help them to withstand the heat today. And watering can be a little bit time consuming, but it can make the difference as to whether your plants make it or not. Especially container gardens. They have to be watered. If you want to know a good way to measure how much you're watering, is take, for instance, I have this on shower on this hose, and if I take this and try to fill up a 5-gallon bucket with it, with this on the setting that I water these plants with, it gives me a good gauge of about how long it takes to put a gallon of water on these plants. And of course the sun is already getting up over here in this garden. And then of course while you're gardening, you can do a little bit of cleanup. Where you were weeding. That always makes a mess. I get out here every morning, I see where the birds and the rabbit and maybe even a squirrel, I've been seeing a squirrel, have been out here digging in this garden. And then here I am out here digging in it, so sometimes you just have to do a little cleanup when you're watering. But I wasn't able to get as much done today as needed to be done out here in this garden. Gardening is a lot like housework. It's never, ever really always done. Because right when you get one task done, you might turn around in the next few days and that same task will need to be done all over again. And in trimming that tree, I didn't even notice there's a passion flower growing out of it. I had to back up to step 4 for a minute and go ahead and get that passion flower out of that tree. And then move back on to task number 5, which is to water things thoroughly. Well, this is what we can get done today. In today's time, we'll have to save some of the regular tasks. Some of the other tasks we'll have to save for another day. But I feel good that I got out here and did some maintenance. I maintained my gardens, and I was able to get a few things done before the heat sets in on everything today. And that brings me joy. And there are 5 simple tasks, these 5 simple tasks that'll help you. The weeding, the pruning, the topsoil, or the, not topsoil, but the top dressing. To feed and fertilize, and then to water. Those are 5 general tasks to help you maintain the garden on a regular basis that will help it so that gardening is not overwhelming. Because it can be overwhelming and it can be consuming, but it doesn't have to be. You can break it down into the little steps to maintain it. That'll keep you having a beautiful garden that'll look maintained and bring you a lot of joy. Feed the bees and the pollinators and help fill your apothecary cabinet. Thank you for joining me today, and like always, until next time.